The fog rolled in like a whisper, cloaking the narrow roads in a thick, pale veil that seemed to muffle even the crunch of gravel beneath Daniel's boots. He paused at the base of the long, winding path leading to the old music academy. Suitcase in one hand, his worn leather satchel in the other. The structure loomed ahead, tall and regal, its stone facade scarred with ivy and time. A faded sign above the iron gate read, St. Iphigenia School for the Vocal Arts. He exhaled slowly. This was supposed to be a fresh start. Daniel, 32, stood with the quiet posture of someone who listened more than he spoke. His deep brown skin caught faint glints of the morning light, breaking through the mist. His hair, short and tightly curled, glistened slightly with dew. He wasn't afraid of silence. It was where he found music. But this was a different kind of quiet, the kind that pressed against your ribs like a warning. A woman in her 60s awaited him at the iron gate, tall, angular, with silver hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes as sharp as piano wire. "Mr. Dorsey?" she asked. "I'm Headmistress Levine. You're right on time." She didn't smile as they walked toward the building. She gestured to Grand Hall, the garden lawn reclaimed by wild vines, and the tall bell tower that hadn't rung in decades. "It's good to have music return to these halls," she said curtly, though some prefer it stay buried. Daniel frowned. "I thought the school had been closed for renovations." "A polite explanation," she replied. "Tragedies leave scars, the kind that paint themselves into the walls." Inside, the hall smelled of dust and forgotten wood. His footsteps echoed too loudly. Every corner seemed to inhale his presence. And one door on the top floor, massive, carved with intricate musical motifs, was bolted shut with rusted chains. "That one stays closed," said Levine, her voice low. "You'll do well to ignore it." As she turned and disappeared down the corridor, Daniel was left staring at the chained door. Something deep within him stirred. Not fear exactly, but curiosity laced with unease. The silence in the building wasn't just absence. It was waiting. The next morning, Daniel moved through the academy's wide corridors with slow, cautious rhythm, his fingers trailing along the dusty wainscoting like they were tracing invisible notes. The building groaned in the early hours, with expanding, pipes clinking, windows breathing under cold panes. Yet, beneath it all, there was something else. A hum, a vibration that didn't come from the wind or plumbing. It was too deliberate, too human. His assigned room was modest, tucked near the west wing. The furniture was antique but well-maintained, and the upright piano in the corner, though out of tune, was the only thing that felt truly alive. He pressed a key and the sound rang out, dull, strained. Still, it made the silence flinch. Later that day, Headmistress Levine gave him a brief tour of the classrooms, most of which were empty, except for one. There, 8 students sat waiting, eyes wide with anticipation, and something else, like restraint. They didn't chatter among themselves, as children usually did. They sat straight, hands folded in laps, lips sealed like they knew that sound was something to be used sparingly in this place. Then he saw her, Anna, a pale girl with long red curls braided down her back, no more than 12. She wore a white blouse and gray skirt like the others, but her eyes were darker than they should have been, hazel tinged with charcoal. She said nothing, just watched him with an unsettling focus. "Your choir," Levine said, almost as if presenting a ritual rather than a class. "They've all passed the aptitude screening. Anna is gifted." Daniel smiled gently, nodding. "We'll begin with scales tomorrow." That night, after a dinner served in silence and a walk through the misty courtyard, Daniel returned to his room. He sat at the piano and opened a fresh sheet of staff paper. But when he flipped the lid open, he found something already there, a composition, handwritten and ink slightly faded, like it had been penned decades ago. The title, Lacrimosa Vocalis. No name, no date, just music, melancholic and haunting, with lyrics in Latin. The phrases sharp and unsettling. Et vox tua tespit eterno. And your voice shall fall silent for eternity. He didn't remember placing it there. The handwriting wasn't his. Later that night, he walked the halls once more, needing to clear his head. As he approached the central staircase, he heard it again, a faint, fragile harmony drifting down from the upper floor. A girl's voice, pure and almost sad. He climbed quietly, pulse quickening with every step. But when he reached the source, there was only the bolted door. The chain carvings gleamed faintly in the moonlight. He waited, heart pounding. Then, softly, from the other side of the door, a single note, echoing, impossibly delicate, then gone. The rehearsal room bore the bones of faded grandeur. Dusty velvet curtains clung to tall windows, and the grand piano in the center, though beautifully carved, carried a sorrowful tone with each key pressed. Daniel stood before the students the following morning, offering them encouragement, but they watched him more than they watched their music sheets. Especially Anna, quiet, rigid, almost statuesque in the third row. He handed out simple warm-up pieces, curious to hear the balance of their voices. "We'll begin with something light," he said. "No need to impress. Just breathe and let it out." They obeyed, harmonizing softly. Their voices blended gently, though a few struggled with pitch. Anna remained silent, sheet in hand, mouth closed. Daniel approached her with a soft tone. "Would you like to try something alone?" No pressure. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then she stood. No nod, no eye contact. She simply opened her mouth and began to sing. Her voice didn't just fill the room. It bent it. It was a tone that carried something unnatural, far beyond her age or size. Ethereal, flawless, and laced with a cold sadness that made Daniel's spine tighten. The room seemed to inhale. The dust particles in the air froze mid-float. Outside, the branches stilled. Every student's eyes widened, mouth slightly parted, as if she had somehow reached inside them. As she neared the end of the Latin refrain, words he hadn't taught her, the lights snapped off. Total darkness fell, and the room became a tomb. A metallic clatter echoed near the ceiling, then silence. "Stay calm," Daniel said, his voice steady but tight. He reached into his pocket for his phone's flashlight. The screen flickered on. Anna was standing exactly where she'd been, but the students were now huddled, visibly shaken. He found the light switch. The room blinked back to life. That's when he saw it. The portrait above the piano, once a faded oil painting of a stern-faced man in conductor's robes, had changed. His expression, once stiff and neutral, now bore a faint smirk, and his eyes, previously dull and distant, now seemed sharper, more vivid. Watching, Daniel blinked, stepping closer, heart thumping. "Anna," he asked quietly, "where did you learn that piece?" She looked up slowly. "I don't know," she said softly. "It came in a dream." The room returned to normal. Light, breath, movement. But the chill didn't lift from Daniel's spine. He dismissed the class early, watching Anna walk out with the same silent grace she had entered with. That evening, as he reviewed the music in his room, he found a scribbled note on the back of the lacrimosa vocalis sheet. It read, "The voice opens what the fire could not." And when he looked at the painting again on his phone, the smirk was still there. The next day came shrouded in that familiar, creeping fog, thicker now, clinging to windows like breath from something watching outside. Daniel sat at the edge of his bed, holding the lacrimosa vocalis sheet. His fingers traced the ink as if hoping to uncover the meaning hidden in each line. He couldn't shake the note. The voice opens what the fire could not. What fire? Drawn by instinct more than logic, he descended into the school's archives, a low, narrow hallway behind the library, filled with rotting books, yellowed newspapers, and a heavy scent of mildew. At the back, beneath a tarp, he found a locked filing cabinet. The key still hung from the rusted lock. Inside were brittle documents, yearbooks, choir schedules, and finally, a newspaper clipping dated November 13th, 1974. The headline, "Tragedy at St. Iphigenia. Fire claims lives of 18 choir children and conductor." The article described a concert held in the original choir chamber, now bolted shut. A gifted choir, praised across the country, led by a conductor named Father Eliam Rousseau, was performing their final piece. The fire had started mid-song. Authorities blamed faulty wiring, but survivors spoke of strange chanting, doors that wouldn't open, and one boy screaming, "Make it stop! He won't let us stop," before the building collapsed in flame. Daniel stared at Rousseau's photo. It was a man in the altered painting. That night, Anna's whispers began. At first, soft muttering behind her closed door. Then louder, clearer, Latin verses spoken in an ancient cadence. Daniel stood outside her room, frozen, as she repeated one phrase over and over. Silentium est donum, vox est vinculum. Silence is a gift, voice is a chain. The next morning, Anna didn't remember speaking. Her voice was raspy, her eyes sunken. Daniel confronted Headmistress Levine. What happened in that room? What really happened? She hesitated, then relented. They weren't just singing, she whispered. Rousseau believed the human voice could touch the divine, that certain harmonics could open spiritual doors. He pushed those children beyond their limits. People called it passion. I called it possession. Daniel left, his thoughts a whirlwind. That night, he found a dusty old reel-to-reel tape marked Finale Performance, Rousseau. He borrowed the school's vintage player and listened alone in his room. The tape began with soft, angelic harmonies, children singing in eerie unison. Then, as the final verse approached, the voices distorted, strained, and suddenly screams erupted. Metal clashed, wood cracked, and amid the chaos, Rousseau's voice pierced through, commanding, "Finish it. The silence must be earned." Then a final, awful note, followed by nothing. Daniel sat in stunned silence. His fingers trembled. From outside his room, a piano key pressed, just one, then another, and a third. Down the hall, the old choir chamber remained chained, but the music had already started again. Daniel stood in the hallway, every muscle locked in stillness. The notes echoed faintly, as if the piano were playing underwater. Slowed, warped, hollow. He stepped closer to the chained choir room door. The carvings on the wood, musical notes, cherubs, and roses, seemed to breathe in the dim light, and behind it, unmistakable now, were voices. Not just one. A choir. He reached out. The iron chains were cold, but not frozen. They rattled slightly at his touch, as if reacting to the music. One rusted link had already cracked. He backed away. The next day, Anna was missing from rehearsal. Daniel asked the other students, but they avoided his gaze. One boy, Elias, murmured, "She said she had to practice alone in the old room." Panic hit like a drumbeat. He searched the halls, calling her name. Her dorm room was empty, her sheet music torn. But as he passed the staircase, he heard it again, her voice, rising in perfect pitch, echoing through stone and shadow, leading him back to the chained door. Now, the chains were on the ground. The door stood slightly ajar. Daniel pushed it open. Inside was darkness, not the absence of light, but the presence of something heavy. The air was thick, unmoving. As he stepped inside, the room lit by the dim glow of candles, freshly lit. The choir loft was untouched by time. Wooden pews curved in a semicircle. An organ stood silent at the back, and in the center, surrounded by dust and echoes, was Anna. She stood on the conductor's platform, eyes closed, hands raised, not like a singer, but like someone receiving a command. She began to sing, but her voice wasn't her own. It was older, wiser, full of grief and rage. The air vibrated. Shadows twisted along the walls, and from the pews, silhouettes began to rise, small figures. Children in uniforms, their eyes empty, mouths moving soundlessly. They sang in harmony with her, a ghostly chorus, resuming a concert left unfinished. Daniel called out to her, but his voice was swallowed by the hymn. The sound clung to his ears, drilling deeper with each note. He staggered forward, gripping the pews for balance. "Anna!" he shouted again. "It's not your song." But she didn't stop. Her body trembled, her face streaked with tears. But she sang, because something inside her demanded it. And above them all, in the shadows of the choir loft, a figure stood watching, smiling, conducting. The figure in the loft stepped into the candlelight, tall, robed in scorched velvet, hands gloved in white, face pale as wax. His eyes gleamed like wet ink, ancient and hollow. Father Eliam Rousseau, yet no breath moved his chest. His presence didn't feel human. It felt like memory brought to life by grief and obsession. He raised his arms, and the choir obeyed. The ghostly children turned their heads in unison. Each face flickered between past and present, features blurring, twisting. Anna stood at the heart of it, still singing, her voice cracking under invisible pressure. The notes had grown sharp, piercing, laced with something more than melody, something ritualistic. Daniel stumbled forward. "You have to stop. They're using you." But Rousseau only smiled wider, his fingers conducting invisible strings. With each motion, Anna's voice sharpened. Her eyes rolled back, her small frame trembling like a tuning fork under a divine command. Daniel remembered the note. The voice opens what the fire could not. He now understood. Rousseau hadn't perished in that fire. Not fully. His spirit had bound itself to the music, to the choir, to the unfinished song. And now, through Anna's voice, he was forcing the piece to reach its end. A final note to finish the ritual. A final note to open the gate. Daniel reached the conductor's stand, grabbed Anna by the shoulders. "You have to fight it. It's not your song." Her eyes flicked toward him, briefly human. Then she collapsed forward, the note breaking. The entire room shuddered. The choir's singing stopped instantly. Rousseau's smile faltered. The candles blew out in a breathless gust. Silence fell, then rage. Rousseau's hand clenched into a fist, and the shadows surged, slamming Daniel backward into a pew. He gasped, vision spinning, ears ringing. The choir children turned to him, their hollow mouths opening, emitting a low, dissonant drone. Anna stirred. She crawled to the fallen lacrimosa vocalis sheet on the floor, Daniel's copy, still ink-stained. She tore it in half, and screamed, not in pain, in defiance, a raw, primal sound that shattered the harmonics. The windows cracked, the air convulsed. The ghostly choir began to flicker, unraveling in smoke and ash. Rousseau howled, a horrible, guttural noise of centuries lost, and reached out, but Anna held her scream until her voice broke. And he vanished, gone in an instant, swallowed in silence. The room exhaled. The candles flickered to life again. Only Daniel and Anna remained, breathing, alive. The old choir room was sealed again the next morning, this time with more than chains. Father Rousseau's portrait had been removed, the loft stripped of instruments, and the doors boarded shut under Headmistress Levine's silent orders. No explanations were given to the students. Only whispers remained, whispers that spread like wind between the halls of St. Iphigenia. Anna didn't speak for days. Her voice was hoarse, her eyes distant. Daniel sat with her on the edge of the school courtyard every evening, watching the fog roll over the hills. There were no more rehearsals, no more music, just quiet, until one morning, Anna handed him a folded paper, a new song, one she had written. The notes were delicate, imperfect, human. "It's not about him," she said softly. "It's mine." Daniel smiled. Months passed. The new choir, rebuilt slowly and carefully, never returned to the old chamber. They rehearsed under sunlight, in open spaces, surrounded by life. And Anna, with time, began to sing again, not with possession, but with feeling. Her voice still held that haunted beauty, but now it belonged to her. Still, sometimes, when the wind hit the walls just right, or when a lone note echoed too long, Daniel would pause. He'd listen, and for a brief second, he'd hear something distant, a hum, a breath, an echo, because some songs, even when silenced, never truly end. They wait, they listen, they remember,